Hey y'all, it's Celt. Let's talk about government spending, the Thanos snap, and how I can make a social media career out of debunking everything this man says. Roll tape.
Y'all ever wonder if Thanos could have actually snapped his fingers with the Infinity Gauntlet on? Well, you don't actually have to wonder anymore. Because last year, the Biden administration spent $118,000 of taxpayer money to find out. Yeah, $118,000.
So after that clip I showed you, he goes on a rant filled with curse words about the security of the border, how Biden's not doing anything about drug crime, but Biden is still spending a bunch of money on studies like this. And all of it, well, 99% of it, is just made up. The 1% of it that is true is, yes, there was a study on snapping. Not on Thanos snapping, but on the physics of human beings snapping. And that study did receive government funding, and there was a mention of the Thanos snap. That's the extent of what he said right there that is true. Let's look into it. First, let's look at the grant that went to approve this study. And luckily, grants are public information, so it was just a Google search away. We have it right here. We can see that the money amount that he lists is pretty close to accurate, $118,000. There was a little bit of extra money a different year, but the initial year of funding was $118,000. But there's something very important to look at that initial year of funding. What year was that funding released in? 2020. So question, how is the Biden administration funding a study in 2020 when Biden didn't take office until 2021? Initial amendment date, the start date, and the first year funds were released, 2020, meaning this study was approved and the funds granted during the Trump administration, not the Biden administration. So that's the first lie, that it's the Biden administration that approved this when it was done under the Trump administration. The second lie we can also disprove within the grant itself. If we do a search for the word Thanos, because supposedly this study is to study whether or not Thanos could snap in the Infinity Gauntlet, we can see what it says. And if we look, there's not a single instance of the word Thanos in this research grant. And research grants contain an abstract outlining what the study is going to be on and what the funding is going to be used for. And in that abstract, the word Thanos is not used once, because this was not a research study on whether or not Marvel's Thanos could snap in the Infinity Gauntlet. We can even do this with the actual paper produced by this research study. If we open it up, which is a freely released paper, we can see that the word Thanos is not mentioned one time in the research paper. If this was a study about Thanos snapping in the Infinity Gauntlet, Thanos would have to be mentioned in either the grant or the research paper itself. And as we can see, that's not the case, because again, this is nothing more than propaganda and lies. And since propaganda is normally based off some small element of truth, we have to look and try to figure out where did the Thanos link come from. And that's an easy find. Scientists like to link their research to pop culture. It kind of sucks to do a research piece and only have a limited amount of people to read it. Knowing how humans snap and the physics behind it is useful information because it can lead to things like improved prosthetics for humans. But the issue is not a lot of people are going to read a paper about that. The people who are going to use that information. But imagine spending that long of your life to find something and you want to get people excited about it. So what do? You take the part of your research where you figured out that metal on metal does not snap very well, and you link it to pop culture in an interview. And then places like the Smithsonian and Scientific America release an article talking about your research and how it links into something like pop culture, like Thanos snapping the Infinity Gauntlet. Because a lot of geeks and nerds like science and comic books, like this one right here. This serves two main purposes and probably some many more. But one, it lets your researchers celebrate their achievement for a little bit, give them a happy, good feeling. And two, linking your research to pop culture gets press releases for your university or your research group that you wouldn't normally get. In academia, publicity and press releases and things like this equal further grants for further funding. So if you can take a research project and find a way to link it into something that is in the mainstream popular culture as a byproduct of your research, that's funding for your university. So again, this is just a case of the right and conservatives continuing to lie. The study was not about the Thanos snap in the Infinity Gauntlet. That was just a pop culture reference they were able to make as a byproduct. Also, the Biden administration didn't fund this study. The Trump administration did. I would tell you, like I normally do, to weigh the evidence. But the person that I showed in that earlier video never shows any evidence for you to weigh. I have made repeated videos debunking that person as a source for information. That person is nothing more than a propagandist. And if you see them talking, you should assume that they're lying.